The story begins with a nightmare experienced by Yeon. In the dream, she feels as though she is being drowned by someone and briefly sees a ring worn by the assailant. However, Yeon wakes up and realizes that it was just a dream from her past, though the mood and tension from the dream still linger. Once Yeon wakes up, she is shocked to find herself lying on the floor, with Hee-ju asleep next to her. Hee-ju, showing no confusion, simply starts to straighten himself up as if nothing unusual happened. Yeon, feeling strange about the situation, quickly moves to her own room to freshen up after the strange sleep. She then rushes to call her subordinate, hoping for important news. However, her subordinate had already contacted her via WhatsApp, but Yeon hadn't seen the message. The WhatsApp message reveals that the result of the voice analysis matches with 99.9% accuracy. Yeon is taken aback and deeply shocked by the news. The scene shifts to when they are having dinner together. The atmosphere during the meal is light, but the conversation focuses on the strange incident earlier, why they ended up sleeping on the floor. Hee-ju only gives a small smile and offers little explanation, while Yeon wonders, trying to make sense of what happened. The next day, Yeon is at her office attending a meeting with her subordinates regarding the progress of the C-406 case and the kidnapping investigation they are working on. In the meeting, they conclude that C-406 and the kidnapper are not the same person, though there are several confusing similarities. The meeting ends without any concrete answers, but Yeon feels that something is off and that further investigation is necessary. Despite the conclusion, Yeon feels that her confusion remains unresolved. She starts to connect the nightmares she had with the events around her, including Hee-ju's increasingly mysterious behavior. There seem to be many things still hidden, and Yeon feels compelled to dig deeper in order to uncover the truth. At the age of 9, Hee-ju first encountered Baek-seok. Baek-seok, who was unusually cherished by his grandfather Baek Jang-ho, had never been shown in public until he was a middle school student. Even his relatives had never seen him grow up. With sharp and nervous eyes, Baek-seok was sitting in a corner, quietly crying. To comfort him, Hee-ju, at the age of 9, sang a silly song, thinking it was the funniest thing in the world. Baek-seok remarked with a faint smile, "You're really bad at singing." By the time Hee-ju was 12, she was introduced as the person Baek-seok would marry when she grew up. At 18, Hee-ju saw Baek-seok as the grandson of the prime minister, someone who had become a prominent figure, not the boy who used to moan in pain. In an act of defiance, Hee-ju made her second threat call to Baek-seok, sending him photos of her thighs, wearing black garter belt stockings, and threatening to release scandalous rumors about his wife. However, Baek-seok didn't take her seriously, dismissing her with cold indifference, telling her not to waste her time. Frustrated, Hee-ju's anger flared, and she mocked Baek-seok, asking if he hadn't noticed the unusual marks on Hee-ju's thighs. She threatened to expose Baek-seok's secrets, making a decisive choice to break their marriage contract and not pay the penalty. She then calmly returned home, as if nothing had happened. When Baek-seok asked her about the threat phone call, Hee-ju responded coldly that he should stop asking about such things. The tension between them grew. Even though Baek-seok had been receiving numerous threats, Hee-ju's actions, especially mentioning Hee-ju, started to get under his skin. The fact that the kidnapper knew about his wife was troubling him, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. Baek-seok had a private meeting with his team to discuss the matter. He discovered that Hee-ju's past was full of trauma, including a tragic car accident that claimed her half-brother's life. Despite everything, she was the only one left unscathed. Raised in a broken family, Hee-ju had learned early on to rely on herself, which led her to hide her emotions for years. She had been gaslit by her mother, who manipulated her into silence. As she grew older, Hee-ju's ambition became clearer. She had learned the skills necessary to survive in a world full of power and manipulation. She wanted to break free from the control Baek-seok had over her and expose his lies. After receiving more threats, Hee-ju finally took the matter into her own hands, making one final call to Baek-seok, demanding that he leave Hong Hee-ju and return to his original fiancée. The tension escalated when Baek-saw tried to track down the kidnapper, while Hee-ju used the threat to push back, declaring she would expose Baek-saw's involvement in the scandals. Their power struggle intensified, with both of them using their resources to try and manipulate the situation. Hee-ju also started to uncover more about Baek-saw's dark past and the lengths he had gone to protect his family's legacy. Baek-saw, while maintaining his control over the situation, couldn't ignore the unraveling chaos. He discovered shocking truths about Hee-ju's past, including her traumatic childhood experiences. Over time, both their worlds collided, with Baek-saw trying to hold on to his power and Hee-ju fighting for her freedom. In a final confrontation, Baek-saw learned about the sinister events that had shaped Hee-ju's life, realizing that their relationship, built on manipulation and control, was no longer sustainable. As their fates intertwined, both Baek-saw and Hee-ju were forced to face the truth about each other and the complex emotions they had buried for so long. Their pasts, their secrets, and their struggles would ultimately define their futures. Saw-won, determined to not be used by anyone but to control those around him, silently endured the pressures placed upon him. Meanwhile, the real Baek-saw's parents, Baek-jong and Shim Gyu-jin, refused to accept the fake Saw-won into their home, as they hadn't even been able to hold a proper funeral for their real son. Shim Gyu-jin, the mother, was particularly adamant, demanding that the impostor live up to the family's expectations. Baek Jang-ho, the patriarch, retorted angrily, calling her hypocritical for raising such a monstrous child and threatening her to obey if she wanted to stay in his favor. Saw-won, now living under the shadow of the dead boy's name, became physically and mentally drained. His eating habits deteriorated, and nightmares of drowning, as if in place of the real Saw-won, plagued him every night. However, his only solace came from watching the silent movements of Hong Hee-ju, who lived in the neighboring house. Her hand gestures, which seemed to soothe him, became the only source of comfort in his otherwise bleak existence. In her, he saw someone who, despite everything, seemed to fight to survive, and it made him respect her deeply. Saw-won eventually joined a peacekeeping mission to the war-torn region of Argon, seeking an escape from his torment. It was here, under the vast desert sky with the sunset in the distance, that Saw-won found himself thinking of Hee-ju more and more. His photo album slowly filled with pictures of Hee-ju, and he found himself drawn to her silent strength. Hee-ju, meanwhile, realized that with every threat she made, Saw-won, though outwardly indifferent, was deeply concerned for her. His cold exterior hid his inner worry and care. She recognized that he was not as unaffected as he seemed. While on a mission, Hee-ju found herself falling from a cliff, a near-fatal accident. Fortunately, she survived, but her phone was dead, forcing her to use Saw-won's 406 phone to contact him. Saw-won, now convinced that the threatmaker, identified as 46, was Hee-ju, deduced that there had been an agreement between her and the real threat. Despite this, he pretended not to know, assuring Hee-ju that he would be there to help her. When she was rescued, Saw-won kissed her, telling her he would wait for her to confess everything. Meanwhile, Baek-saw continued his power plays, hiding his knowledge of everything and making Hee-ju believe he was still unaware. He expressed his feelings towards her more openly, which only deepened her own affection for him. The once cold relationship between them gradually warmed, and they finally shared an intimate moment. However, as they began to grow closer, the real threat resurfaced. The mysterious figure sent Saw-won a shocking message, literally and metaphorically, a bombshell that changed everything. It was revealed that the person who had been thought to be the real Baek-saw had survived, and he was back to reclaim what had been taken from him. At the same time, Hee-ju's older sister, Hong In-na, who had been abroad for surgery, returned with her own disturbing knowledge. She had learned the truth about Baek-saw, having recognized that the person she once knew was not the same. In-na, after realizing the implications of what she knew, confronted Baek Jang-ho, but her attempt to expose the truth led to a tragic accident, a car crash orchestrated to silence her. Yi-ju, who had been tormented by the situation, found herself torn between the secrets she had learned and the harsh reality of the people around her. Her thoughts grew even more confused when the threadmaker called once again, pressuring her to get Saw-won to confess. As Saw-won prepared to confront the truth, Yi-ju was left grappling with the weight of everything. She felt utterly betrayed, unable to reconcile the person she had loved with the cruel realities of their world. At 2104, Saw-won confessed everything to Yi-ju. He admitted that he had been there when Baek-saw fell into the water, and that he only watched as the child drowned in the clear river. He then handed Yi-ju a bank account filled with money, telling her that she should go wherever she wanted, domestically or abroad, and live freely, without worrying about Chairman Hong. He urged her to find a man who would love her and give her affection. He said that when she turned 90, she could think of him for a moment, and when she became Baek, she should come find him. The next day, Baek-saw held a press conference during the release of a special documentary on Baek Jang-ho, where the real Baek-saw confronted the imposter Baek-saw. He threatened him, saying that if he didn't reveal his true identity, he would kill Yi-ju. The real Saw-won believed that once the name of the imposter Baek-saw was tarnished, it would return to its rightful owner. However, the imposter Baek-saw had no intention of living forever under someone else's name. After Baek Jang-ho passed away, the imposter quietly collected materials related to the Baek family, but he also grew fearful that Yi-ju might discover the terrible truths, and he developed an overwhelming greed to not just discard the name, but to take it all. Knowing about his biological father's crimes and the orchestrated car accident, the imposter Baek-saw felt he could not express love to Yi-ju. But he couldn't bear to watch Yi-ju marry another man. So, he made a deal with Hong and Na and married her, convincing her to stop imagining herself as Baek-saw's true wife. This, in reality, was a promise he had made to himself. Saw-won discovered the imposter Baek-saw was his nephew. He realized that a life built on lies would be destroyed once the true owner of the name returned. He also made a vow that he would make sure that neither Baek-saw could restrain Yi-ju again, and both of them would vanish from the world forever. At the press conference, the imposter Baek-saw declared that from that day forward, the name Baek-saw would cease to exist. He revealed that he was not Baek Jang-ho's son, but the child of Baek Jang-ho's late wife. He also exposed all the murders and crimes committed by the Baek Jang-ho family. At that moment, the Baek Jang-ho Memorial Hall exploded, an act masterminded by Baek-saw's biological mother, Shim Gyu-jin. Shim Gyu-jin, an expert in negotiations and criminal psychology, had endured the humiliation from her father-in-law about raising a monster. She patiently waited for the moment when the imposter Baek-saw would rise to become the perfect son and restore Baek-saw's name. She had plans to kill him and hold a grand funeral for her real son. As for the real Baek-saw, he had survived because someone had pulled him out of the river after he fell in. He had lost his memory and lived a long time without knowing who he was. A few years ago, he was reunited with his biological mother in prison, where he had been serving time for multiple assaults and attempted murders. His nails were dark and smelled of decay. When he learned the truth about his father's crimes, he realized that when he first heard about his son's death, he had felt not pain, but a sense of liberation. The real Baek-saw decided that he didn't need the troublesome fake son anymore, and with the knowledge of his father's guilt, he resolved to get rid of him. The person who had made Yi-ju contact Saw-won using the 406 phone was Shim Gyu-jin. She also arranged for Yi-ju to be pushed off the cliff. After the explosion, Yi-ju could not find Baek-saw's body, but she realized that she had not wanted to escape a political marriage, but instead had always desired Baek-saw. She declared to her biological mother that she would no longer allow anyone to use her, and she freed herself. One day, exactly 100 days after his death, she received a call from the same number she had been given. Hee-ju now realized that Baek-saw was still alive. Determined to find him, Hee-ju became an international sign language interpreter and traveled to the war-torn Argan Republic. There, she found Saw-won. Saw-won had known about the explosion and avoided being caught in it by hiding, but he had faked his death to prevent anyone from using Baek-saw's name again. After meeting with Hee-ju, Saw-won was caught in an attack. As they fell into the river, Hee-ju struggled desperately to pull him out. His body was stiff with panic, but Hee-ju calmed him down by tapping his chin gently, assuring him everything would be okay. Saw-won, finally conscious, looked at her like she was a dream. Hee-ju held him close, continuing to swim toward a glimmer of light at the surface. Finally, Saw-won broke free of his panic and tapped Hee-ju's chin in return. It was the first time they were speaking the same language. From then on, Hee-ju was a part of Saw-won's world, both in the past and in the future. Saw-won asked Hee-ju to give him a new name, one that would free him from the dead language of his old identity. Hee-ju named him Gyo-won, inspired by a red sunset they had once shared, symbolizing the burning life that Hee-ju had brought to him. Gyo-won, once a fake Baek-saw, now lived with Hee-ju, free from the past, and together they faced the future. Later, they returned to Korea, where Gyo-won testified against Baek Jang-ho's family. The fake life he had lived under someone else's name was now exposed, and his true identity was revealed in the special article. He became a key figure in the exposé of the Baek Jang-ho family's crimes. And thus, the story of the fake Baek-saw and the real Baek-saw, once intertwined with lies and deception, came to its end, leaving behind only the truth and the new lives of Gyo-won and Hee-ju.